How do you structure an experimentation system that speeds up launches while still ensuring compliance and safety?
So in regulated companies, Reuben, it's often said that your roadmap is determined by the regulators and not by the product team. Why usually companies struggle, in my view, is because they look at compliance and regulation as an afterthought. Winning over long term for me is not one or two key bets. It's about these small decisions we used to take on a daily basis, on a sprint by sprint basis, which have compounded to where we are today. Nothing will guarantee 100% whether your product is going to work or not until you hit the market. Before that, whatever you are doing is just trying to reduce the possibility of failure. Whenever we are discussing about a particular topic and this question comes, right, should we go with option A, should we go with option B, right? And a lot of times, while I could use my judgment or instinct to say, okay, we should take option A instead of B, right, because that's where the product sense comes in, I used to intentionally ask the teams to, okay, why don't we test it out, right? Why don't we test it out? And that is how it became a behavior that everyone now knew that, okay, we need to take a decision, let's do an experiment, and then let's figure it out.
Welcome to a brand new episode of the VWO Podcast. Recognized as a finalist in the CMA Awards 2025 for Best B2B Podcast. With hours of in-depth conversations, we talk about using CRO to deliver what your users want, while also driving long-term growth for your business. Before we speak to our guest, here's a very quick overview of what we do. VWO is a leading experience optimization platform that enables you to gather in-depth user insights and build winning experiences across your website and mobile app. VWO Copilot, our AI champion, handles the heavy lifting of suggesting test ideas, creating variations, and finding insights, so you can focus on making strategic decisions that drive growth. Now, without further delay, let's jump right back to this conversation.
Hi, all. Welcome back to the VWO Podcast. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Reuben, Product Director at VWO, leading the feature experimentation product, and I'll be your host for this episode. My guest today is Sourabh Gupta, a product leader with over 17 years of experience building and scaling fintech and consumer tech platforms. He's spent his career turning complex financial systems into simple, trusted products people use every day. Sourabh is currently the SVP of Product and Design at Flip, one of Indonesia's largest fintech platforms. He leads product, design, and data across a growing portfolio of products and has played a key role in driving adoption, revenue, and impact, while also building and scaling teams and systems. In this conversation, we'll focus on how he approaches product leadership at scale and the principles that guide building and scaling durable fintech platforms in high growth markets. Let's get into it. Hi, Sourabh. Welcome to the VWO Podcast.
Thanks, Reuben. Thanks for having me. Looking forward to it. When I've done a bunch of podcasts or conferences in the past, but I think this topic is something which doesn't get talked about that much. So I think that's why I'm also looking forward to talk from my learnings in terms of experimentation and product leadership, and hopefully people see value in it.
Absolutely. I mean, again, it's very exciting to have you on board. It's not often that we sort of get to get this sort of first-hand experience and perspective on something that's so relevant in today's market, right? It's 2026, AI is taking over, channel efficiencies are getting crunched, roles are merging, so many new things are sort of happening, right? So I think it's the most relevant time to be discussing this. Before we sort of get into those serious questions, do you have any rituals or habits that help you get in the zone, whether it's before a podcast, presentation, or big meeting?
I don't think I have a ritual as such. I think what has happened is over the years, right? As your scope keeps on increasing, you are looking at multiple problems. You're just context switching like every 30 minutes or so, right? So I won't say I have a ritual as such, but I think I've trained myself in a way that I'm able to switch context very quickly. Like I'm on a call talking about expanding our loan portfolio, and the next call I'm trying to solve a onboarding problem with the team. So able to context switch effectively. I do keep a tracker which is prioritized in terms of what problems are on top of mind, and I keep on rotating in that list. So I know that okay, today what are the key problems I need to look at. But I do start off that earlier in the day so that I know okay how do I progress. And I use Slack effectively on that because we as a tool we use Slack in Flip to communicate, and a lot of discussions are happening on different channels. So I think Slack reminders is a kind of a lifesaver for me to have a track of what all things are happening, where are I need to check in, what I need to follow up, what is to be prioritized for today or what is to be prioritized for later. So not something fancy, pure play, focused deep work, and just a to-do list. That's what I use.
It's very interesting that you say that, right? I think in the world of such complex personal workflow flows that people are sort of building, it's ultimately the simplest thing that sort of gets us through, right? And that's very interesting perspective from you. And for folks who are joining us, that's like a 101 in terms of how do you sort of behave or operate as a product leader. Yeah. So
And
thanks for
I'll
sharing
give a
that.
quick tip on that as well because a lot of my team members have asked me about this, right? Like how I'm able to get on top of things, all the time, how I don't drop off on threads. I think a lot of people have to-do lists, right? That's the easy part. You
Yeah.
can use different apps for it. You can use Trello. You can use whatever. The key is to build a habit of whatever your to-do list is. You need to look at it periodically. Okay. So if you're not looking at it again, no point. Whatever list you have, wherever you are maintaining it, you will keep on losing out on things. So this
Right.
has to be something you're doing multiple times in a day to be on top of it. So Slack is like one way where my muscle memory is like that. Like if even if I'm on a meeting, I'll quickly do an alt tab and a control K to see what are the threads that are open that I need to work on. So I think the
Right.
habit part is the key. It's not the tooling, it's the habit.
Absolutely right. And so the habit and consistency is
Yeah.
honestly what drives any system. Very interesting. Thanks for sharing, Saurabh. And with that, let's get into our main topic of the day, right? So right off the bat, let me get into this. Flip has become the market leader in consumer and merchant payments in Indonesia. Now, when you look back, what was that most pivotal product bet, let's say an experimentation driven product bet that made this scale possible according to you?
Sure. So I'll give a bit of context, right? So Flip started about a decade back trying to solve the problem of moving money within Indonesia. So kind of like a P2P transfers app, because there was a lot of friction that existed back then, and moving money interbank in Indonesia was also very costly. So that's how we started, and that's how we found a product market fit. We were bootstrapped for many years, and when we started to kind of scale up, that's where the question came up to us that if we are solving the problem of moving money for users within Indonesia, and we have built our own payments platform for it. We have built an engine where we have multiple payment rails connected, a lot of logic that was built. So the point that came to us was, if you're solving this for users within Indonesia, why don't we solve the same problem for businesses and merchants, because they also have the problem of they need to move money and accept payments efficiently, at a lower cost, at scale, with reliability, and for people to move money outside of Indonesia, right? So those were the two key bet I would say we took early on to diversify our product portfolio in terms of payments while sticking true to our core value, which was to be in the business of moving money. But if you ask me, is that the like a big win for us? I look at it differently. For me, I think what has happened is over the years, we have been able to change the culture and DNA of our team, where be it product, be it business, marketing, any team, they have defaulted to experimenting and iterating over any decision. So winning over long term for me, that's why is not one or two key bets. It's about these small decision we used to take on a daily basis, on a sprint by sprint basis, on a product by product basis, on a feature by feature basis, which have compounded to where we are today. So today at Flip, we have bunch of product portfolios. We have about 10 to 12 large products. We are diversifying beyond just payments today. So today our motto is more around three areas, which is send, spend, and save. And we are building multiple products on that beyond payments, touching lifestyle, and effectively cross-selling it to our users. Because payments, as you know, is a low margin business, but that's the funnel through which you get a large chunk of users, and then you need to
Right.
cross-sell them alternate products, lifestyle products, where your margins are higher, your take rates are higher, and that's how you increase your average revenue per user. So to answer your question in a nutshell, For me, the biggest win is how the mindset of the team was changed and how each individual has put experimentation in their DNA and decision making, which has compounded over so many years.
Right, and that's thanks for sharing that, Saurabh, and that's so interesting because what I'm sort of hearing you say is it's not just the big bets that, let's say, leadership takes, right, or the founder takes. It's also the compounded effect, and that's a term that I want to sort of double click there. Compounded effect of every team member truly internalizing that any decision that they make has to be backed by data, has to be backed by some form of experimentation, right? Nothing is rolled out without that. So,
Absolutely. Because as you scale, right, it's no longer the founders or two or three individuals who will hold all the decisions. You have to democratize decision because otherwise you lead to get to a decision fatigue. And if you don't have the right foundation, then your team is not taking decision the right way. So that's why I think this cultural change is important.
absolutely, absolutely, and it's a great point to sort of take away from this, right? And I think a lot of companies, especially as they sort of grow out of that bootstrap phase to getting more mature, that's something that folks typically struggle with, right? How do I sort of ensure that I have a team that sort of wins collectively and is not just dependent on a few strategic bets that may or may not work, right? And that's the difference between success and failure for an entire company at times. So, no, it's very interesting. Thanks for sharing that, Saurabh. So, which also raises a good segue into the next point, right? Now, as you also scale, you have a lot many products under your belt, right? And so, I believe currently you have more than 10 plus products in your portfolio,
Yep.
right? And so, for these products, how do you determine whether to focus on experimentation on core revenue driving journeys or newer product areas where learning velocities could be probably just higher?
Okay. So I think it's an interesting point that you mentioned on the portfolio, right? Because a lot of people, when I interact with them, they will ask, okay, so at which stage your product is? Is it 0 to 1? Is it 1 to 10? Or is it 10 to 100? Right? But my point to them is always that when you are a fintech or any growth stage company, you don't have one product. You have a portfolio of products, and different products are at a different stage of maturity. So today at Flip, I have a product which is, you can say, 10 to 100, where it's serving millions of users. We do 20, 30 million transactions for that product per month, moving couple of $1 billion monthly, right? And then I have also a product which is at a 1 to 10 stage, where it has found an early product market fit, and we are trying to figure out how do we optimize on our pricing, communication to scale that product. And then we have products which are more on 0 to 1 experimentation. We are still trying to figure out, is there a demand for it, does it solve an actual problem or not. So depending on what the priority of the organization is, your focus becomes on which product you want to focus on, because you can always experiment on each of this product. It is just that what you are validating, or the hypothesis will be different, right? A 0 to 1 product might be a product where you want to have a go no go hypothesis validated, right? Whereas a more mature product is where you are trying to see, okay, if I can improve this particular funnel with 1% change, right? Because that percentage change might result in thousands and dollars in terms of revenue, right? So depending on the product stage, the what you are testing or experimenting also changes, and it comes back to the organization, what their focus is, right? Do they want to do this optimization on these products, or do they want to focus on products which are giving them double digit growth? So for us, that is how we kind of choose and decide on where we want to focus based on our existing priorities. The key difference is when the product is mature, we'll be more you can say guarded in terms of experimentation, because we know any mistake can lead to a larger impact, right? So we will be more cautious about what we're experimenting, making sure that we have configured things more correctly. Whereas for a 0 to 1 product experimentation, the focus is on learning velocity. We want to quickly learn about some of the details. So we won't be that strict about the parameters. It's okay if it is scrappy, because we will prioritize time to learning over the accuracy of an experiment. So that's how we look at experimentation across different products and prioritize accordingly.
Got it. And I think this is sort of like a key takeaway for many folks out there, right? When they also talk about maybe flipping it to a more product management angle here, when folks talk about what does product management mean, it of course depends on the context of the industry and the company, whether
Yeah.
it's a growing stage or mature. But then it also depends on the product that you're working with, right? And your metrics are different accordingly.
Yes.
Your bets that you take are different. And one thing that I really found interesting is for 0 to 1 products, learning velocity, right? It's about building and failing quickly and understanding that, right?
Yeah.
And not everything has to be linked to a revenue output. I have a follow-up question there. Of course, anything that we do ultimately ends up impacting our top line or bottom line inevitably, right? So it's a function of whether it's a leading or a lagging metric, right? And the degrees of separation over there. Now, typically it happens that when you're prioritizing experiments, the ones that sort of have a not so obvious impact on, let's say, some business metric or let's say a core product metric tends to get deprioritized. How do you or how does Flip sort of address that?
Sure.
I think one hint that you gave is of course the learning loss, right? But I'm just sort of opening that out to you.
Sure. So, I mean, that what you mentioned is a problem when everyone is looking at one or two areas, right? How we work is we have individual pods or squads, you can call them, who are all focused on their problem area. So, when we are talking about prioritization, it is getting prioritized within that particular pod, right? So, that pod's or that squad's focus area for that semester, if they need to do certain experiments, and the experiments, like you said, while everything moves towards your top line or bottom line, the leading metrics for them could be more around, let's say, KYC funnel improvement, right? But you can always translate it to more users coming in, more revenue you're making, right? But we generally don't have this prioritization problem because we prioritize within that particular team. So within that particular team, we'll figure out what their priorities are. Because the moment you do it cross team, then all of these questions start coming in, and then it becomes harder for platform teams to experiment because platform teams generally their outcomes are not that visible or not that easily correlated with the top line, right? Versus a services team, which every transaction leads to a certain amount of revenue, right? So
Right.
that's how I think we have been able to solve it because we generally don't see that kind of a conflict. We have staffed each team accordingly. Each team has the capability to run independent tests, and that's how we are democratize it. There's no centralization of testing. Everyone is in charge of their own destiny. So
Yeah.
we rarely see these conflicts.
Got it. Got it. Just again, you're tying back to that, that experimentation culture that you're building, right? And
Yeah.
absolutely makes sense. Now, at the same time, though, like now, Flip is within the space of finance, right? And now we know that finance is typically a very regulated environment. At the same time, as you mentioned, teams need to move fast. And then at the same time, you need to be also regulated. You need to be compliant. You need to be cautious because there's also internal, risk management, but also there are other regulatory agencies that are monitoring you. In this scenario, how do you structure an experimentation system that speeds up launches while still ensuring this compliance and safety?
Sure. So in regulated companies, Reuben, it's often said that your roadmap is determined by the regulators and not by the product team.
Right.
But jokes aside, I think the point you have making stretches beyond just experimentation, right? I have heard this about even taking bets on product, right? Where people will raise question that when you have a regulatory setup, when everything is something that you need to validate with your regulator and compliance team, how do you move fast? And I think from my experience, while there is no like silver bullet to it, like why usually companies struggle, in my view, is because they look at compliance and regulation as an afterthought. They look at it as a checklist. Once they have decided to do something, then they approach the compliance team or look at the regulations. uh, but for us, and I think companies who are more mature in this area, you need to make compliance and regulations as part of your product development process, and that's what we have done. That right from a product conception itself, when we are ideating about a new idea, we loop in our compliance team, we get their buy-in, we talk to them, we'll have meeting with them, we'll explain what we are trying to do, and we are sure. So we try to get the surety that this is something we can go ahead with. And there are obviously areas, because compliance is not always white and black, right? There are gray areas, and that's where we will go for an audience with the regulators as well, to make sure that whatever ideas we have, whatever concept we have, they are on the right side. So firstly, that's how we have so far been able to mitigate the situations where we are launching something and we need to roll back, because whatever we build already has blessings of the regulator, our teams, and that has happened by embedding compliance within a product development process. Now, when it comes to experimentation, also, what I have realized with time is, for regulators, right? It's more important to understand the intent and not really what is written exactly in a document, right? So that is why when we're thinking about experiments as well, we understand what is the intent of the regulator, and we are on the right side of it. And within the experimentation network also, you need to look at what are you experimenting with, because there could be
Right.
areas, for example, even though we are a fintech, but if I'm experimenting on a particular design, on a copy, on an illustration, that doesn't go against any particular regulation, right? So we divide it into multiple layers. The UI layer is something we are very fast to experiment with because we know it doesn't conflict with anything. Then there will be a decision layer where we are a bit more guarded. And finally, anything that has to do with user data, money movement, then we are absolutely cautious on what we want to do, goes with the law of the land. And in my view, experimentation is more about getting that hypothesis proven, right? So it's not that we are taking a particular risk with the product that the regulators won't be okay with it. And
Right.
I'll give you an example. So I think we were doing a pricing change. Now, from a regulation perspective, the goal was you need to communicate that to the user upfront, and you need to communicate it clearly, like whatever is changing. So when we were experimenting, it was basically about what is the best way to communicate, right? So we were following what the regulator intended, but we were still experimenting. But the experiment was more on what gives us the better conversion. Okay, I show it as a fee change, as a pop-up, as a tooltip, or how, like, as an animation. That's where I started to experiment with. So far, I would say at Flip, we never have had any problem because of this philosophy, how we work together with regulators when we are innovative.
Got it. And thanks so much for sharing that, right, Saurabh? Because, even with some of our large FS customers, this is something that we hear often, right? And essentially, they do struggle with keeping up that velocity, struggle with the process of it, and of course, those become key concerns and sometimes a blocker to even building that culture, as you said. And so it's superb to sort of see how combining process and just what I sort of see as like a prioritization matrix, right, of sorts, like of what you can do and what you cannot do so easily, which then becomes the guiding principle for your entire team. Fantastic. Uh, and so, in this case, though, and maybe just going back to, I think, the broader point of democratizing the experimentation culture, right? Of course, we can always start something, but sustaining momentum is usually difficult, right?
Right.
And clearly, Flip has cracked that, right? You're having every team, every person do this, thinking about this and doing this on a day in and day out basis. So I think what a lot of our audience would be curious to understand is what is that operating model, or what maybe are there any rituals that sort of help scale this out within Flip's product culture, right? Where you have continuous experimentation as a core tenet of how you view every product release.
Sure. So when I started at Flip, right, this was back in 2021. We were still a small early Series A company. We didn't do like a lot of experimentation. I think that wasn't part of the culture. We didn't have proper tooling for instrumentation, for analytics, for A/B testing. Nothing of that sort was placed. So I started from there. Setting up the right foundations, getting the tools in place, getting the data in place. But what I realized from my past experience was, just because I have the tooling in place, I have a framework in place, I have a process in place, I have a template on how we should be, writing experimentation docs, things will not change automatically. You know,
Right.
Change always needs to be driven by someone. That's my learning, right? It doesn't organically happen that, you have sent out an email that, folks, tomorrow this is what we will follow, and everyone just starts adopting it, right?
Yeah,
So I was very
absolutely.
conscious of that I will have to be the one who shepherds the team initially for the next 3 to 6 months to change this behavior. And then once I have some of these individual leaders, then they can do that to their teams and others as well. So the strategy that I used was, I intentionally used to nudge people to experiment whenever we are discussing about a particular topic and this question comes right on options. Should we go with option A? Should we go with option B? Right? That invariably comes on your product discussion. And a lot of times, while I could use my judgment or instinct to say, okay, we should take option A instead of B, right? Because that's where the product sense comes in. I used to intentionally ask the teams to, okay, why don't we test it out, right? Why don't we test it out? And that is what I think slowly became a culture where we were not taking decisions on gut feel, on personal opinions, even if we had a solid judgment, right? And I'll come to that, like why judgment is important.
Yeah.
We were intentionally making everyone default to an experiment, and that is
Right.
how it became a behavior that everyone now knew that, okay, we need to take a decision, let's do an experiment, and then let's figure out. Now,
Right.
this sounds great, but I'll tell you what was a problem with that, which also happened in Flip. Now, once this was done, what I started observing was teams started to over experiment. And not a lot of companies will say that, and you will not hear it from a lot of people, but I could clearly see we are over experimenting because teams are defaulting to experiment wherever they need to take a judgment call also, to avoid, let's say, debates, to avoid, let's say, he said, she said. They were
Right.
just saying, okay, let's do experiment. And you don't want that on a longer term also, because you want your product team to build product sense and instinct. You want
Yeah.
them to take judgment calls that, okay, I have a very strong conviction on what will work, because experiments are costly. They are not free. Like if I need to take a decision today, I can take a judgment call and move ahead with it. But if I need to experiment, okay, I'll configure it. It will take some time. I need to wait for rollout, then wait for it to be statistically significant. Then also maybe it's not statistic. Then I need to change other parameters, right? So it keeps on going. So experiments are never free. They are costly. So that's why it's very important for the teams to be conscious about what they are experimenting with. So that's the balance I think we need to take. One, I think I talked about how we need to handhold the team to build this culture. And second, at the same time, we need to balance so that the teams don't end up over experimenting also.
Right, and maybe let me just double click on that, right? Because it's such a classic problem that you just stated, right? Like, where do I go with gut feel? On, let's say, some things which are just incrementally, maybe things that you know that if I add a particular feature, it's incrementally great, right? So why should I even test
Yeah.
it? And there's, of course, there's a counter argument to that also, right? Because there are, let's say, secondary metrics, or let's say there's a tertiary metric that might have a downward impact. On this balance of things, what do you think has helped the most to sort of regulate that? Is it sort of driving that as part of a culture, as part of a process? Is it the tool that has helped it? How do you sort of strike that balance?
I think this is where it has to be a bit abstract and more of a culture rather than a document or an SOP, right? Because
Hmm.
uh, different people are different. So let's say if I have uh, two or three lead or group PMs, right? Now, how each of them operate would be different. What sort of conviction they have for their product area would be different. So it becomes a bit hard and something that you cannot really put it as a process, right? It is more of mentorship, it's more of grooming and telling them why this adds value. Because as I said, right, the goal is not to be prescriptive over long term. The goal
Hmm.
is to have people think the way you are thinking, but it has to be intrinsic for them. So that is why I think the approach, at least that has worked for me, is to groom people to think differently so that they are leaders of tomorrow, where they have strong product instincts themselves while balancing with the experimentation culture. And also, one of the things which helps is, what is the cost of failure, right? What's the cost of your judgment being wrong? And if the cost is minimal, then we'll rather prioritize speed, where you can take a quick decision and move ahead, rather than waiting out to see the results of an experiment.
Got it, got it. Economics 101, trade offs are everywhere, isn't it? So now let's sort of move on to the next part. Right now, you mentioned we're speaking of product folks taking these judgment calls,
Yeah.
right? But of course, you of course lead product design and data teams
Yes.
in general, product management is at that sort of confluence of, let's say, every team in at least a tech-based organization, right? Like we're stuck. We are that in that Venn diagram, that middle person that everyone sort of puts the
Intersection with
blame
everything, right?
with everything. Something goes good, it's the team. Something goes bad, it's the product manager. On a lighter note, not subscribing to that. Anyhow, so but then coming to my question here, there are other teams, of course, that are part of this decision-making process, that are part of taking some calls on this, and each of these teams, design, data, even engineering teams, compliance teams, have different incentives and ways of thinking. Now, of course, you lead 3 of these teams, but like you said, you also influence almost every other team in the organization. What do you think can be done to empower these other team members and their leaders to make experimentation decisions autonomously, while still aligning to that broad strategy that you're able to set out for the product and the company?
You're right. So in general, I haven't found that the problem comes with the approach, right? So it's not generally about experimentation. It's more about having a shared goal. So problem with the cross-functional team is, as you mentioned, uh, their interpretation of or the incentive of particular goal might be different. So hence, what is most important is to have a very clear understanding of what the shared goal is. While what activities each team is doing to achieve that goal might be different, it all needs to translate to the same result or outcome, right? That is what is most important, that you need to align on the problem space and not the solution space. Because you can have autonomy, but without alignment it leads to chaos. And if you have alignment without autonomy, then it leads to bureaucracy, right? So what we do is we define goals more top down on what we want to achieve, but in terms of how we achieve those goals, that is more about the teams to come up with the bets they want to take. And this is a cross team initiative mostly. For example, product engineering, data design, right? We have a PED cross, or a PED group as we call it. Now, to achieve a particular outcome, the inputs that a PM is doing versus what a designer is doing versus someone from a data is doing could be different. So that becomes their key results. But all of that combined will help you move the overall metric which we want to do. So that is how we kind of operate. And every quarter, when we kick off after our planning, team comes and present their bets to us. And the goal of the leadership is not to question on the tactics, but to pressure test the assumptions on why do they think something will work, why something will not work. So in general, our way of working is like in leadership, we all have strong opinions, but those are loosely held. We will go with the team's decision if they are able to convince us on why a particular bet makes sense and why others doesn't make sense. So that's how we operate. I'm not saying it's perfect, but I think we at least fundamentally understand that the problem with cross-functional collaboration is the understanding of the shared goal, and it's a
Yeah.
shared celebration which is important. To your point, on something goes right and something goes wrong, a lot of time what also happens is again, it depends on the organization, how mature the product org is. But if a product is successful, a lot of time the attention is around the team which built the product, right? But
Yeah.
let's say there was someone from the operations team who worked really hard to make sure the product was successful, managing a lot of customer complaints. That person never gets the limelight, right? So
Yeah.
celebrating wins collectively, recognizing everyone's effort is extremely important for a cross team collaboration to be successful.
Fantastic, right? I think one key point that sort of stood out to me is you have different KRAs, but you need to have that common metric, right? Many of us, or many companies do structure this out, but how does that actually translate on ground, right? Like that, and how do you reinforce it? I think that's the key point there. And then lastly, celebrating those wins. I think absolutely. I think that does seem to be sometimes the sort of dissonance that happens where folks do feel that, hey, okay, what am I even doing, right?
Yeah.
And lastly, I think just one point I really liked for folks, maybe product managers who are specifically listening to this, I think words to live by, having strong opinions, but sort of loosely enforcing them, right? Like, Saurabh, do you mind just sort of giving me that quote again, because I think that's a money quote right there.
Having strong opinions but loosely held.
Yeah, there you go.
I mean,
I
so
think
because you see a lot of times, some exec will just stick on to a point for the sake of sticking, right? Even the when the data says otherwise, and that's not the kind of leadership we want to have. Uh, in fact, whenever I'm even interviewing people and people are trying to understand culture, my key point to them is always that I'll be more than happy if you come and tell me that I'm wrong on certain thing, because that will tell me that you have thought through that particular problem statement, right? Like
right.
I have no issues in being proven wrong, because that tells me that people I have in the team are solid. Like they are able to think beyond what I am able to think, right? And that's one of the traits of good leadership, I think, that we should have in different organizations.
Absolutely. And a prerequisite to any success that you could possibly even imagine in experimentation, right? So,
Yeah.
absolutely makes sense. Awesome. Um, so now let's go. Let's talk about failures, right? And that's part of parcel of what a product manager should go through. If you haven't seen a failure as a product manager, then are you even a product manager, right? And so when these experiments are more critically, let's say, product launches don't go as planned or they fail, what have these moments really taught you as a product leader, and how do you leverage those learnings towards making that plan towards progress?
Okay. So, Ruben, from my experiences, what I have learned is you can only know if a product launch is going to be successful once you have taken it out to the market, to the public. Before that, whatever you are doing is just trying to reduce the possibility of failure. You are doing your researches after design, you are doing usability tests, you are running A/B tests, you are doing control rollout, you are doing detailed analysis, competitor analysis. All of that will just reduce the possibility of a failure, but nothing will guarantee 100% whether your product is going to work or not until you hit the market. And the reason for that is there are n number of things which can go wrong. Okay, you look at a competitor and you'll say that, okay, the product works for that competitor, let me do the same thing. But when you launch, it's not working. Why? Maybe your brand is not positioned in the right way. Maybe
Right.
people don't look at you like they look at the competitor. Maybe how you did your GTM or communication did not resonate with the user. So there are so
Right.
many different reasons for a product to not work. So that is why when you talk about failures of product launches, I look at it as a start. Like launch for me is a start. It's not the end. When
Yeah.
you Because the outcome is not launch. The outcome is to hit a certain number, right? So when you launch the product, it's just the beginning, and it's very rare that you launch a product and it automatically scales. In real life, once you launch a product, you really need to shepherd it, cradle it, and iterate over it for extended period of time for it to start
Right.
seeing success. So that is why I think experiments or launch failures, they're just telling us about different hypotheses on what works, what doesn't work. It's a lesson for us, it's a learning for us, but we don't look at it really like a failure, right? I look at it literally like a learning, and we figure, okay, what didn't work. For example, okay, this is a good one. So we in Flip we build a game voucher product where users could buy game vouchers. These are your Mobile Legend games, Free Fire. So you
Mhm.
want to buy a skin, a sword, or some asset, you can buy that. So it's pretty big in Southeast Asia. I'm sure in India also it will be very similar. So what we did was we have a consumer app, and we launched this product there. And from the market, we knew that there is a huge demand for it. But when we launched it, we were hardly seeing any numbers. Now, obviously, we start analyzing what's going on, what's happening, and normally, superficially, everything was right. There was no issue with the rollout. Our analysis were correct, our research was correct, product funnel was fine. I mean, there was no bugs there, etc. uh, but after some investigation, it clicked to us. Our product was built like a fintech product, right? You come in, you're doing sign up, you're doing your KYC, and then you're landing, and then you have a lot of products. Now, people who were buying these game vouchers, etc., a lot of them were students, school going kids, right? And they didn't have documents or IDs to do KYC. And for them, this fintech product didn't seem like the right place where they will go to buy a game voucher. And we took this Eureka movement and did a very basic website, which was built actually by our design team using AI tools, and we
Yeah.
launched this product on a web, same supply of game vouchers, etc., but on web. And suddenly it just grew organically, right? That people, and obviously we did a bit of marketing, communication, etc., but it scaled very rapidly. The number of users we got in 2 months when it was an app, we got it within a week. So that
Wow.
was a eureka moment, right? So now tying this back to your question, we couldn't have thought about this when we were building it, right? We did it the typical flow. You did your analysis, build the PRD, UI, UX, development, everything done. So this comes from the learning in the market. So that's why I think these are not failures; these are learnings, and the point is, how do you apply these learnings to achieve your end outcome?
Got it. Got it. And so essentially, you start off, understand, iterate, and you improve those metrics that you set out, right? And of course, you need to have that clarity on those objectives and metrics as well. Absolutely makes sense. And I think, again, a big takeaway for a lot of us in this space, right? It's you never have that winning strategy at the get go. It's all about how you sort of address and iterate. Now, one thing that I sort of found very interesting here is how you sort of went and sort of did that RCA, right, that root cause analysis of sorts. So if I may sort of double click on that, what helped you get this information in a way that was structured and quick for you to make that final judgment call? Was it if you, would you attribute it to the tools? Would you attribute it to the process that you used? What helped you do that the easiest?
Yeah. So in this case, it was so we usually do a post launch analysis as well to understand, uh, you build a product or a feature with an intent. After launch, is it meeting that intent or not, right? So that's the fundamental of it. So we did that analysis. Obviously it took us a while, right? Firstly, we were seeing, okay, why the traction is not happening. We're trying to pump up through marketing initiatives, but after 1.5 months, that's where we said, okay, something doesn't seem to be working, because we have put efforts from our side in terms of communicating GTM, it's still not working. So we started investigating after 1.5 months of launch. And what we did was, so my guidance to the team was, let's talk to people, right? That's the fastest way to get response. So we distributed into some of the users who were already using us. uh, we talked to some members of our team who were avid gamers, and we tried to get recruit people from other competitors, right? And that's how the insights started coming in, that okay, how we are distributing it. And it didn't take us a very long time, right? uh, Sixth, seventh person we spoke to, we started seeing a pattern of same response, right? And that's where you know, okay, that your hypothesis is correct, right? When after after, so generally in research, five is considered a number where you start seeing a repetitive pattern, right? So when we saw that pattern, we knew, okay, this seems to be key problem, and we then took corrective actions on it. So would have taken us a week to 10 days to get it out, and then we just went again back to the drawing board to iterate over it.
Got it. Essentially, just good old school product management, user research, get to a customer, get them on a phone call or just in person,
Yeah,
ask them what's
at least
happening.
in this case, right? I mean, obviously, different scenarios, maybe you can get data through experiments as well. But in this scenario, it was, your old school, talking to your users and understanding what's happening.
Understood. Understood. Awesome. No, thanks for sharing that, Saurabh. Now, you mentioned your design team put up a website on their own just using AI tools, right? And
Yeah.
2026, if not 2025 already, but 2026 is the year of AI, and maybe for several years from here as well. But if I bring AI and experimentation together,
Yeah.
right? Do you believe, or how do you believe AI assisted experimentation will change the way we look at product leadership, right? And does this create new opportunities for product teams? Does it create more challenges? And what do you think is that sort of guiding principle for product leaders, for product managers, when they start thinking of adopting AI within experimentation?
Okay. So I'll take a step back, Ruben, on this. Instead of talking specifically on experimentation, let me talk more for AI-driven product development, because I think experimentation would be a subset of it.
Yeah.
And let me cover on what we have done here plus what I'm seeing in the market. So So today you will see that product teams, PMs, or other members of the product tribe, they're already using AI, LLMs to either write effectively, write quickly, do some basic analysis, do prototyping, vibe coding. So it's already happening at different levels, different extent, based on organization to organization, based on their maturity. But what I see in future is, besides your essentials for product management, which could be around strategy, communication, alignment, innovation, product sense, everything else is going to get automated.
Right.
I have a very strong conviction that your mid to low level of product work will get
Yeah.
automated.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you what I mean by that. Now, for all product teams, PRD is like a standard document that, it has become very standard. I don't think it used to be that standard like 10, 15 years ago, but now like PRD is the term that is used everywhere. Like, okay, get me a PRD engineer with us, get me a PRD designer with us, what get me a PRD, right?
Yeah.
I think writing PRDs is mid to low level work because fundamentally you as a PM you already have thoughts in your head. You just need to put it out in a document so that, because people can't read your mind, but people can
Yeah.
read a document, so they refer to this document to understand what do you want to do, what is the problem that you're trying to solve, how do you measure it, what's the benefit, so on and so forth, right? What I'm trying to do at Flip and what I'm very sure will popular is we are actually building an agent which is
Hmm.
trained on your context, on your organization, which you are training on how you write in that organization, the template, so on and so forth. And what you need to do is you need to input certain parameters to that agent, and that agent will turn out a PRD. There are already tools for it, like I think Chat PRD is one website which does that. But I think you need to build context, organization context for this to be working effectively. Now, this agent is very much possible, and I think we'll have it soon at Flip as well. But what I'm seeing in future is it's not going to be just one agent. It's
Hmm.
going to be a bunch of agents. So imagine you as a PM, you started off, put in some fields, data, it creates a PRD. That feeds to another agent, which is supposed to do risk assessment on what are your idea is. As in fintech, you need to have this risk assessment. And that
Yeah.
agent can be trained on your SOPs around fraud, risk, regulations. You can put all the documents from the regulators in it to understand, hey, what idea you have is compliant or not. And there is a feedback loop. Now the feedback loop goes back to the earlier agent. Earlier agents modifies the PRD, sends it back. Then it goes, let's say, to a agent which takes up those requirements, creates a prototype. Then it goes to agent which creates a basic tech spec on how you are going to implement on it. So the possibilities are immense. In my view, I think
Yeah.
so. This is the future towards which I think we are going, and that's how I think what will happen is your low level work, anything that does not require your brain power, will get automated. Now, when it comes to experimentation, I think because of the pure compute power that AI today brings in, where you are able to solve things or get answers very quickly. Some of the things which I definitely think will happen is your hypothesis generation will become much faster.
Right.
Synthesizing data would become much faster. Pattern detection across experiments, simulating outcomes before, if there's something risky, you can simulate it, right? Before taking it to the users. You can all mock it much more easily today than you used to do it before. Faster failure detection, like you can understand, okay, when your experimentation is going sideways. So I think the possibilities are immense. There is no limit to it. I mean, the more you'll think, more you will figure out on what you can use AI for. And that's what
Right.
we have done in Flip as well. Like, my guidance to the team is look at AI to solve your day-to-day problems. If you have a
Yeah.
particular problem, think how you can solve it. And that is where the adoption is happening, because you can't always think about product problems to solve. So people are starting by solving their individual problems.
Hmm.
Someone will say that, hey, I have a problem. And okay, this is a real example. Let me share this with you. So I had a PM, and he had this problem where he was like, I go into a meeting, I come back, there's a thread in Slack, and there are like 90 messages, and I need to go through it one by one just to understand what the context is.
Right.
He on his own, using NA10, build a Slack summarizer thread. This was done before Slack launched it as a feature. So today
Hmm.
Slack has this feature, but this PM in my team built this to solve his problem and democratize it within the organization. So that's the power of AI that I see is going to change things. So to your point on product leader, I think with product leadership, as I said, right, there are key points around strategy, communication, alignment, and product sense, judgment. Those are very important. So I don't think in near future AI is going to replace that. So I don't think AI is going to replace product leadership, but I think AI will replace product leaders who don't use AI. So that's how I see the difference.
Yeah, that's interesting. And then, so to summarize, essentially, you also have, I mean, there's two layers here, right? One is how do I enable, tying it back to that point that you mentioned earlier, that how the team works closely with compliance, legal teams, right? And so, how do you sort of enable that in a more seamless fashion where you have like these agents who are doing that work for them? And so you're not bound by, let's say, human inefficiencies or time. And then a second sub thread over there is, how do you sort of also empower yourself to give more time to experimentation by sort of delegating those other tasks, those easier tasks to the AI layer, right? And then so that's one part. And the second aspect is, the art of actually running that experiment, right? Wherein you spoke about AI generated hypothesis, AI generated summaries, failure detections, etc., right? And combined together, that sort of, so you're building the culture and you're easing that process around this, which is fascinating, right? And so if I may sort of just double click on that, in your current A/B testing tool, or any tool that you use really to run experiments, do you have that AI layer already embedded into the
So
workflow?
so we have the, from a tool perspective, they have that capability, but we haven't seen it to be very advanced, to be honest. So at times we will just take a dump of the data and analyze it separately using other AI tools. So that's what we have been doing so far. But I do sense that a lot of these analytics companies, etc., they also understand the power of AI, and what they started off by was started making it a paid module. But
Yeah,
now once you do that, right, you understand that it's very easy to take the data and go somewhere else and analyze it. So what they are
yeah,
doing is companies are making AI as a default to use their
yeah,
product, right?
yeah.
So that if people see value, then obviously you're going to stick to a platform. So that's something I'm seeing in the market.
Right. And VWO, we have something called VWO Copilot. It has been default free from the get go. I think we sort of recognized how we need to sort of put that out there, and it's sort of integrated into everything that we do, right? So you mentioned how AI is making things faster for your team. Things that are taking time is reduced because the grunt work is done by someone else. Now that's from the perspective of a product manager. You take that perspective from an engineering person.
Yeah.
Everyone's using some sort of AI coding tool, right? Whether officially, if it's there, or unofficially, it's there. It's happening
Yeah. Yeah.
regardless of whether you want it or not. And when you combine these two things together, essentially what's happening is your releases are happening just much more faster. It's just 10x possibly faster than before. And it's a good thing. It could also be a bad thing because who knows what's getting shipped out there, right?
Yeah.
Is every word or every piece of code being reviewed? Maybe, maybe not. And so in such a world where delivery is now, let's say, 10x of what it was, where do you sort of see the relevance of something that allows you to control rollouts and experiment at the same time?
Sure. So to be honest, I mean, we use Claude, etc., for our engineering teams, but it's not that we are deploying things without review. So, as I said, right, the fundamental is to give superpower out to the teams to be able to execute much more in a given amount of time, more fastly, etc. But your process or the guardrails that you have, be it on reviewing the PRs, merge requests, etc., that doesn't change because we don't think AI is that advanced to know that context, right? So far for us, what we can say is at least 20% of our delivery time has been, saved, or like we have been able to do more with AI today. But it has not had a detrimental impact on other processes that we have. We continue to do phased rollout, having experiments, because that is not fundamentally changing. What is changing is you are able to build something much more faster, quickly, efficiently, right? Uh, but the process that you had before that, that is still there. So this is not something at least I'm seeing, or at least what I know from the other companies I have talked to, because no one is fully relying on AI to just deploy, ship everything. It's right now being used as a assistant, right? That's how everyone is putting it.
Right. And I think Flip also benefits from, as you mentioned, having that very clear process on having phased rollouts, right? So
Yeah,
you're doing gradual release management,
yeah,
you have a process around it, you probably have tools to help you do that. And
yeah,
so I think that's sort of something that maybe more maturing companies or growth stage companies will have to adopt at an earlier stage, perhaps, because you will be shipping out faster. How do you sort of put a guardrail around it, right? How do you put a basic feature flag around it and
yeah,
just have a kill switch ready? And what are the kind of tools that you sort of can do to sort of leverage
yeah.
that, right? And if the same tools allow you to sort of also do downstream experimentation, so and impact analysis. Perfect. It makes sense. Okay. Now, sort of now, of course, you're, as you mentioned, you get invited to a lot of conferences, regulator roundtables, right? And so, in your observation, what are those typically recurring blind spots or misconceptions that you hear about experimentation and product risk, right?
Yeah.
Especially in the world of fintech.
Yeah. Uh, I think one of the most common things that I hear is that risk or security measures are inversely proportional to your user experience, right? Which
Mm,
might be true to certain extent, but a lot of time you need to have this positive friction, right? And that positive friction defines an experience. Let me give an example, right? I mean, today when you want to do payments from, let's say, your e-wallet, you'll have a pin by default. Okay, that pin doesn't need to be there. I mean, fundamentally, it's just there for additional security layer. But today, if I build a product where you are doing a transfer and it doesn't have a pin, as a user, you'll be scared to use that product. Okay, so while the additional step of entering pin has added friction, that friction acts as a positive reinforcement for the user to feel secure. Okay,
right.
so that's why the notion of risk rules always being inversely proportional to the experience, in my view, doesn't hold good. So that's a first misconception that a lot of folks have. The problem is, people should understand that risk rules need to be in the background and not in the foreground. So you should have context based rules. It should not be one size fits all. On experimentation as well, when it comes to regulated companies, a lot of time people think that experiments mean you're risking users money, right? You are exposing to more risk. But in my view, experiments actually de-risk things, right? It's a de-risking mechanism, because if I do a one big bang release after 6 months, it could be that there are a lot of problems that happen. But if I break that into smaller monthly small releases, phased rollout, which is just to a certain audience, not to all audience, then I'll know and learn much more early, and I'll de-risk any big issues that are going to happen if I do a one big bang release. So that's also,
Right.
I think, something which is kind of a misconception, and that's where I feel that data-led leadership is actually the most compliant form of leadership, because it removes the gut feeling and errors from the equation.
Absolutely makes sense, right? And so three things sort of that you sort of called out there is, one is more risk doesn't necessarily mean a poor user experience, right? And
Yeah,
and that's true with your end user as with, I guess, internal processes, as you correctly
yeah,
mentioned. Not it cannot be the loudest voice in the room, right? The second part is not one size fits all, and the third part being more experimentation is actually de-risk, not
yeah.
necessarily adding risk.
Because you're learning
Absolutely.
earlier, right? You're learning much sooner at a smaller scale, instead
Right.
of exposing a particular issue to all of your users.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Makes sense. Fantastic. For our final question here, and I think it's sort of like a summation of, I think, a lot of points that you've mentioned, but maybe for our viewers, having that in one place would help. And so here the question is, every product leader grows through trial and reflection, right? You're never there on the first day, as you yourself mentioned. What is that product instinct that you had to unlearn in order to truly become an experimentation leader?
Sure. So this will touch upon something I've already shared initially as well. So the theme would be common here, but this is quite interesting because it was a kind of a wow moment for me as well because I didn't realize this was happening. So
Mhm.
I have historically been very good with product sense. I think that's a skill I've been very strong at, even when I was a IC, and to now when I'm a product leader, right? I would generally be able to take a judgment call on a decision and would get it right honestly a lot of times. And that would lead to situations where I will kind of argue like hey, with my peers that hey, why do we want to experiment on certain thing? Because I'm quite convinced that the approach I'm taking is right, and by experimenting we are delaying our time to market and so on. So while the skill was good from that perspective, it became a problem when I became a leader, especially when I came to Flip also and was building the entire team. Because what I realized was it started delaying things because team was always looking for my opinion. Okay, I
Mm.
became the bottleneck for my team, and while my goal was to democratize decision making, because I was good at this, they will default to come to me to ask my opinion on what do you want to do. So that is where I had to kind of unlearn and change this habit where even though let's say I had a strong opinion or something, I will let the team to go ahead and experiment it. I will say, okay, maybe this is a better idea, but yeah, why don't you experiment it and then let's see what's going to happen. And I think that's something which is true not only for me. I've talked to other product leaders, and they also have this similar problem where as product leaders somehow you feel that you need to have all the right answers all the time. Like if your team comes to you with something, you have to
Yeah.
share opinion to them. But I don't think product leaders have a crystal ball where they can see a future, right? Product sense is great, but I think if it leads to you being the center of all decision making, then that is something which leads to problem because there could be some blind spots you are not aware of. You can lead to decision fatigue and your accuracy might come down. So that's I think a behavior that I had to consciously unlearn, where I used to ask the team even if I had instinct. My instinct was an input. Okay, it wasn't a verdict. I will say, okay, here's what I think will happen, but why don't you go and test it out? So that's a learning for me.
Yeah, and it's such an interesting one, right? Because I believe it applies to any level of being a product person, right? Like
Yeah.
whether you're starting off or whether you're like a product leader, leading like an entire portfolio of products as you are, right? And so even for someone who's starting out, it's so important to have that collaborative spirit, not within the product team, but also with your engineers, with your design folks, with your n number of teams that you work with, right? And that's how it sort of scales, right? And so it's a very such a powerful learning that you just shared there. And maybe just to re-quote what you just mentioned earlier, which I think is like the quote for me in this session here is, strong opinions but loosely held, yeah. So applies here too. Fantastic. With that, we are, I think, through the main part of this podcast, I think, on what we want to sort of discuss and sort of get your thoughts on. We do have an interesting segment coming up right after this, but before we go there, what's your favorite travel destination and why?
Good one. Honestly, I don't think I have a favorite one. uh, I think in different points of time, the ones you have visited more recently appeals to you more. That's how
Hmm.
I've realized in life things happen. Like if you would ask me that question 5 years ago, I would have probably said Amsterdam. I lived there for over a year and I love that. But today, if you ask me the question, probably I'll say Labuan Bajo, which is in Flores Island towards east of Indonesia. Because when I went there, I had a fantastic time. One of the best coral reefs I've ever seen. So I had a great time. So I know one place, but yeah, I mean, world. I'm a travel junkie. Love to travel. So each place offers its own value.
Yeah, awesome. And you're in bang in the middle of such a beautiful, region, right? Like such, I think what I think one of those few places which still have intact coral reefs, right?
Yeah, I mean there are spots. Obviously, there are areas where over tourism has damaged it, but still there. The more east you go, where there are less people, less tourists, the reefs are much more alive. And there's also a land of fire, as it's said, right? Because there are bunch of active volcanoes all over Indonesia.
Oh, super cool. Have to plan this.
Yeah,
I might just
you should
PM
you
you
should come over
separately.
sometime. It's a good place.
For sure, for sure. I might just take you up on that. Awesome, awesome. Thanks for sharing that, Saurabh. And with that, we're in our final segment. And so this is going to be a rapid fire. Okay. First question. If you were starting a career in product today, what is the one thing that you would do differently?
I think learn to align more effectively, because I think that was a learning which came a little later, because I started my career in product after certain bit of experience, right? So the way of operating in product is a bit different, where you, as you said in the beginning, right? It's at the intersection of everything. So
Yeah,
your skills of alignment is extremely important to be successful in this role.
got it. Super. One thing your non industry friends still don't understand about your job.
Yeah, I mean, I think the constant question is, so what exactly do you do, right? And that's the general question. Like, I'm like, okay, I do this. I'm building products. I manage. I work with like 10 different teams, but they were like, but what do you own, right? What do you really do, right? So, yeah, that's it's a hard one to explain. And that's exactly why where product management is not a discipline which gets taught in many
Yeah,
places, right? You'll have engineering, you'll have design related courses. You have very few actual degree courses for product management because of the nature of it, right? So what is interesting is you excel in this role if you are great with ambiguity, which is absolutely opposite when it comes to engineering design, where you want to work
yeah,
with clarity, and in
yeah.
product management is ambiguity which makes you great. So yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely resonate. I have a sub question to that. I'm just adding here.
Sure.
Do your parents understand what you do?
Oh, absolutely not.
Okay, so it's the same everywhere.
Yeah.
Great. A person that, okay, the next question. Um, who's that one person that every product professional must follow?
I mean, there are a bunch of leaders from Valley, right, who have very strong, opinions, and I have followed Shreyas Doshi as an example.
Yeah,
I think Lenny's podcast and his
yeah,
material. I think that's just amazing.
yeah,
Just before this call, I was just seeing, just briefly checking out his latest post, which was with I think the founder of Anderson Horowitz, and
hmm,
they were actually talking about the same thing on AI, and which we are doing at Flip, where the lines are blurring between what a engineering is doing, what a designer is doing, what
yeah,
a PM is doing, and that I think is spot on. That's how the world is changing. So I think if there's one person or someone should follow is I think Lenny, because the content that you're getting, like
yeah.
you don't need to go to 10 different leaders, right? He is curating the best of the world and bringing it to you. So that would be my recommendation.
Got it. Awesome. Next question. Three books that you would recommend to our listeners.
I think for someone starting on product management, inspired by Marty Gagan, I think is a default, right? I think he is,
Hmm.
while it might be a bit idealistic, but I think as a foundation, it's a very good book to uh, talk about basic product management, how to go about it, talking about the fundamentals, etc. The second book I think the PM should really read is The Lean Startup by Eric
Yeah,
Ries. I think this is where the whole concept of experimenting fast, learning fast is elaborated by him so long back, right? So, but it still holds value today. And I think the last book is Hooked. I think that's another book by Neer Eyal. I think that talks about how you should be building habit forming products. And between these three, I think one is fundamental, one is on design UX, one is on experimentation. I think these are very good for your foundation.
yeah.
After that, obviously, there are a lot many other books you can read about, but I think from a product management foundation, these three are pretty good.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. I think Marty Kagan famously quoted, "Product management is about building a team of missionaries, not mercenaries." I
Yeah,
think
yeah,
that's from this book,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
I still remember that. It's such a powerful quote.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Next question. Fifth question. What's the best piece of advice you've ever received?
So one advice that I got, which might be a bit controversial as well, but it really works, is you don't align in a meeting. You align before a meeting. You communicate in a meeting. So if you're coming to a meeting with 10 different folks and you think you will present your idea and everyone will be okay with it and toe your line, that rarely happens. The fundamental is you talk to different people before that meeting, you align them before the meeting, and when you present it, everyone will be already bought into the idea. So that was an advice given to me by one of my mentors, and I think that has worked well for me.
Yeah, no, absolutely resonate with that, especially for a product person. It's just alignment everywhere, right? So, awesome. One thing that AI will probably take over in the next 3 years.
I think PRD writing, I think that's the one thing which comes into my mind as I was explaining also, right? I think all the low level work will get automated, and I very strongly believe that everyone is going to have some sort of assistant who's going to do the work for them 3 years from now, and all the grunt work will just go away, like basic analysis, writing documents, etc. will just be kind of done by AI.
Yeah, no, absolutely makes sense. If not product management, what other profession would you have chosen?
I mean, I can talk about what I would have chosen. I don't know if I would have made it to it or not, but I was really passionate about joining the armed forces. So, if not product management, maybe I might be in the army or somewhere.
Okay, did not expect that one. Okay, nice. One product metric that you wish people would stop obsessing over.
MAUs, especially for like fintechs and organizations like such, we only look at transacting users. We don't care about users who are coming on a platform. So a lot of times I'll see people talk about, okay, these many people came to our platform, but if they are coming and not doing anything, what's the point of that?
Yeah,
So for me, MAU is again, the active has different definition, but
yeah,
what I'm trying to say is, for me, the value is always more with people who are coming and transacting on your platform. If
yeah.
that's the kind of product it is, if it's a social media, etc., obviously the metrics are different. But for a fintech kind of a product, right, you need people to come and transact, right? That's the whole purpose.
Yeah, I agree. I think that definition of active is the most debated uh, definition, especially if in a 0 to 1 product. What does active mean, right? And so, yeah, okay. Last question, Saurabh. A dream or goal you want to achieve in the next 3 years?
I think on a personal side, obviously on an organization side, want to scale up, flip to a different level. But I think on a personal side, I would definitely want to work in the ESG space as well in whatever capacity I can, because that's something which is very close to my heart. I haven't been able to contribute much on that so far, but that's, as you said, it's a dream, right? So it's a dream to be able to contribute there.
Awesome. That's good to hear. Well, we are at the end of our session here, Saurabh. Thank you so much for this very insightful, very deep conversation and rather discussion that we had. It is really great to get your thoughts on some of these very very pertinent topics, and I think some of which are still debated. Right, we still don't know the answer to, and so it's really really great to get that perspective. The takeaway is clear. Effective product leadership is less about certainty and more about clear thinking, steady execution, and learning through change, right? So thanks so much for sharing.
Thanks
To
for
our,
having me.
yeah, no, thanks so much. And to our listeners and viewers as well, thank you for spending time with us. If this episode resonated, feel free to share it with someone on your team. And don't forget to subscribe for more conversations like this. We'll see you in the next episode of the VWO Podcast. Thank you so much.
Thank you.